Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. Yesterday, I was speaking with a fellow person in recovery about something that had happened to them in the past. We were talking about forgiveness, and this particular thing that happened was very traumatic, and it is one of those things that on the outset you wonder, well, not only how could someone forgive someone else for doing something like this, but how is this even forgivable? And it brought up the question in my mind, what is forgiveness? I haven't really put much thought into what actually forgiveness means. We're taught growing up to forgive and forget a lot of times. And so we have that in our head as what forgiveness is. It means that you forgive somebody and then just kind of forget that they did it, and you go on living your lives and you act as if it never happened. That may be easy if someone steps on your toe, or someone cuts you off in traffic, or a friend is upset one day and says something kind of hurtful, and you know it's just because they were stressed out about this other thing. Those kind of things may be easy to forgive and forget. But what about those things in life that are traumatic, where someone really hurts you in an evil, malicious way? How do we forgive people like that? And how do we find the strength to move on? So this conversation made me realize that I did not have a very good working definition of what forgiveness even is. And so I had to do some looking online this morning to find some information and to explore this a little bit more. And I wanted to share a little bit about this. And so I'm going to read from a couple of different places this morning, and I'll post some links to the places that I'm reading from, and talk a little bit about what I took from this. There's a lot written about forgiveness. Obviously, it's a key part of the human experience, has been from the beginning of time. Going back to the oldest spiritual texts we have, there's people talking about forgiveness, what it means to forgive. And so lots of resources out there. I'm by no means covering the entire subject here. But what I want to do is clear up some misconceptions about what it means to forgive somebody. For instance, forgiving somebody doesn't mean that you're saying that it's okay that they did what they did. That's not forgiveness. Forgiveness is an action. Forgiveness is an action you take about your own feelings about a situation. So it doesn't mean that you're absolving someone else of their crimes. And a lot of religious people would say that's not even your place. That's God's place to judge other people and to exact vengeance. I don't like that word, but it's used several times in some of the things I read this morning. That's God's place to do that. So your place is really to look at your own feelings of how you're carrying this event with you. So I'm going to read a little bit from a website called The Greater Good. This is from Berkeley College. And it says, this is under the heading, Know What Forgiveness Is and Why It Matters. And it says, forgiveness is about goodness, about extending mercy to those who have harmed us, even if they don't deserve it. It's not about finding excuses for the offending person's behavior or pretending it didn't happen. Nor is there a quick formula you can follow. Forgiveness is a process with many steps that often proceeds in a non-linear fashion. So right off the bat, we get confirmation that forgiveness is not about saying that, you're saying it's okay someone did something. Forgiveness is not about just saying that pretending that something didn't happen and moving on. So we're kind of demolishing the myth of forgive and forget. It's not about that. But what this article goes on to say is that working on forgiveness can help us increase our self-esteem and give us a sense of inner strength and safety. It can reverse the lies that we often tell ourselves when someone has hurt us deeply. Lies like, I am defeated or I am not worthy. Forgiveness can heal us and allow us to move on in life with meaning and purpose. Forgiveness matters, and we will be its primary beneficiary. So, forgiveness is not necessarily always for the other person. Forgiveness is something that we do for ourselves in many cases, and it's something that we do to help ourselves heal from the trauma inflicted by someone else. A lot of times when we develop a resentment for another person, that is the trauma they've caused on us, the trauma they've inflicted, continuing to hurt us. We're allowing that to continue to hurt us. And by practicing forgiveness, we get the opportunity to heal from that. So that's one thing to think about in terms of forgiveness. Another thing that I wanted to read, again, same website, but a different page. It says, just as important as defining what forgiveness is, though, is understanding what forgiveness is not. Experts who study or teach forgiveness make clear that when you forgive, you do not gloss over or deny the seriousness of an offense against you. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting, nor does it mean condoning or excusing offenses. Though forgiveness can help repair a damaged relationship, it doesn't obligate you to reconcile with the person who harmed you or release them from legal accountability. Instead, forgiveness brings the forgiver peace of mind and frees him or her from corrosive anger. While there is some debate over whether true forgiveness requires positive feelings toward the offender, experts agree that it at least involves letting go of deeply held negative feelings. In that way, it empowers you to recognize the pain you suffered without letting that pain define you, enabling you to heal and move on with your life. So again, we're not trying to get rid of the pain that you've experienced as someone who's suffered. We're recognizing that pain. We're recognizing that that pain exists, that that pain was part of what happened, and then we're taking some steps to let go of that pain and to let go of the negative feelings associated with what happened. This is by no means excusing someone for doing something terrible. It's by no means condoning what they did and saying it's okay. It's not meant as forgiveness is not meant as a way of absolving someone of wrongdoing. It's meant as a way to heal ourselves from the pain inflicted by that wrongdoing. So I'm going to read a little bit from this website. Is called Acts 29 and ACTS 29, and it's a Christian website. And there were some parts of this particular page that I didn't quite identify with because it talked about a vengeful God, which that's something that I've never quite liked in some of the Christian teaching. But there are some great parts on this page, and one of the things that it says is the point is that forgiveness does not mean you are to ignore that a wrong was done or that you deny that a sin was committed. Forgiveness does not mean that you close your eyes to moral atrocity and pretend it didn't hurt, or that it really doesn't matter whether or not the offending person is called to account for his or her offense. Neither are you being asked to diminish the gravity of the offense or to tell others, oh, think nothing of it. It wasn't really a big deal after all. Forgiveness simply means that you determine in your heart to let God be the avenger. He is the judge, not you. So a lot of times the negative feelings that we have toward people who've wronged us are there because we somehow and kind of subconsciously feel like those negative feelings are are a way of our punishing that person. And if we can let go of that and realize that's not our place, especially for people who have God as part of their recovery program, if you can really understand God, that's God's realm. Let God's will determine how those people will experience any kind of punishment, how they will experience any kind of reciprocity for their atrocious acts. Your job is to heal from what was done to you. That's your job. And that's what God would want for you. God does not want his creation to suffer. God wants you to heal. And so that's where your job comes in. How do I heal? Well, the healing comes with forgiveness. And that's really well illustrated. And this is the last thing I'll read. Really well illustrated by a couple of examples from this site about forgiving the unforgivable. And the examples are they're a little difficult, but I'm going to read them because I think it's important. For example, a woman named Stephanie had been gang raped as an act of political intimidation in Haiti. But when she was telling me this is someone who was interviewing people who had been victims of very seemingly unforgivable acts. But when she was telling me this, she also wanted to be sure that I understood that she forgave her rapist and prayed for their conversion. In their hearts, she told me, they knew that what they had done was evil. Her desire for them her desire was for them to be reconciled to God. I pray to God to change the heart of the people who hurt me. If someone hurts you, you have to pray for them. If someone hates you, you have to love them. That's tough to swallow. And I recognize that this is all very difficult to think about if you are someone who has been traumatized by someone else or has been a victim of an atrocity. And so, like one of the first things I read this morning, like one of those things said, this is a nonlinear process. It's something that you can't just read this stuff and then blink an eye and say, okay, well, I forgive. This is a process, especially if the thing you're trying to forgive is something that is traumatic, something that's very, very deep seated in you. And so seek help. Look to a spiritual guide, look to a mentor if you're in a recovery program, look toward a mentor in a recovery program. Talk about what you've experienced. For a lot of trauma, sexual trauma, for example, there are support groups where you can talk to other victims of that trauma and talk about their experience with either having trouble forgiving or even finding people who have found a way to forgive. Remember, forgiving is not about saying what happened is okay. That's not what it's about saying. Forgiving is not about saying that you were somehow at fault for what happened. That's not forgiveness. Forgiving is about letting go of pain so you can heal and move on. And I know that there are things that happen in this world that it's hard for me to imagine forgiving someone for. And yet, at the end of the day, when we look at the situation, a lot of times that seems to be the only choice that people have in order to fully heal themselves from the trauma that's been inflicted on them. Easier said than done. There could be a lot more said about this. I'm very interested to hear any thoughts in the comments. So please let me know if you have any thoughts about this. If you have any examples of things that you've been able to forgive that you thought you'd never be able to. I'd love to hear about those as well. In the meantime, I hope you have a great day, and I'll be back here tomorrow with more.